Sleipnir, Odin's eight-legged horse, the fastest creature in all 9 realms, exists because Loki once turned himself into a mare to seduce a stallion. That sentence alone should tell you this is going to be one of the strangest stories in all of Norse mythology. But it starts somewhere completely different, with Asgard itself standing defenseless, without walls, wide open to anything that wanted to walk in and take it. This is the story of how the gods almost lost everything in a bed, and how Loki's most bizarre trick ever saved them barely. After a long war between the Aesir and Vanir gods, the kind of war that leaves everyone exhausted and vulnerable, Asgard found itself in a dangerous position. Its walls, the fortifications meant to protect the home of the gods from giants, monsters, and anything else that might come looking for a fight, had been destroyed or never properly finished in the first place. Asgard, home to the most powerful beings in existence, was sitting completely exposed. And in Norse mythology, vulnerability like that never goes unnoticed for long. One day, a builder arrived at Asgard's gates, offering exactly what the gods needed. He introduced himself as a master craftsman and proposed a deal. He would construct a wall around Asgard so strong and so complete that no giant, no monster, nothing at all could ever break through it. And he would finish the entire project within a single winter, an almost impossibly short time frame for a wall of that scale. In exchange for this work, his price was steep. He wanted the goddess Freya as his wife, along with the sun and the moon themselves. The gods, understandably, weren't exactly thrilled with those terms. Handing over Freya, one of their own, along with the very sun and moon that lit the sky, in exchange for a wall, seemed like a wildly imbalanced trade, verging on insulting. This is where Loki stepped in, and if you've watched any of the other videos on this channel, you already know that whenever Loki gets involved in negotiations, something is about to go badly for someone. Loki proposed a solution that seemed clever on the surface, agreed to the builder's price, but had one impossible condition. The builder would have to complete the entire wall by himself, with no help from any other person, and he'd have to finish it within just 6 months instead of a full winter. Loki's reasoning was simple. No single builder, no matter how skilled, could possibly construct a wall of that scale completely alone in half the time urgently proposed. The gods would get a partial wall started, maybe, and then simply refuse to pay anything at all once the deadline was inevitably missed. It seemed like a foolproof plan, a way to get free labor and lose nothing in return. The gods agreed to Loki's terms and presented them to the builder, fully expecting him to walk away from such an unreasonable deal. Instead, the builder made one small request of his own. He asked if he could use the help of his horse, a stallion named Svadilfari, to assist with hauling stone. It seemed like a minor, harmless request. What's one horse going to do that a team of skilled workers couldn't already accomplish alone? The gods, seeing no real risk in it, agreed to let him use the horse. It was a decision that would come back to haunt them almost immediately. Work began, and it became clear within days that this wasn't going to unfold the way the gods had assumed. Svadilfari turned out to be no ordinary horse. Every night, while the builder slept, the stallion hauled massive stones toward the wall completely on his own, dragging blocks of rock so enormous that the builder himself couldn't have moved them by hand even, with an entire team of workers helping. In fact, Svadilfari seemed to be doing more of the actual heavy lifting than the builder himself, moving stone at a pace that made the 6-month deadline look increasingly achievable rather than impossible. The wall began rising far faster than anyone in Asgard had anticipated, and the confidence the gods had felt about Loki's clever trick started rapidly turning into concern. As winter approached and the deadline drew closer, the wall kept climbing, stone by stone, night after night, until it became undeniable. This builder, with his tireless horse doing most of the labor, was actually going to finish the entire wall on time. With just 3 days remaining before the deadline, only a small section of the wall near the main gate remained incomplete, and at the current pace, that gap would be closed easily within the time left. The gods, realizing the full weight of what they'd actually agreed to, began to panic. They were about to owe this builder Freya, along with the sun and the moon themselves, and there was no reasonable way to back out of a deal they had proposed and agreed to themselves. Furious and desperate, the gods turned on Loki, since the entire situation had been his idea in the first place. They made it brutally clear that if he didn't find a way to stop this builder from finishing on time, his life would be forfeit as punishment for the disaster he'd caused. Loki, faced with a threat he took completely seriously, understood he needed a solution immediately, something that would specifically target the one factor responsible for the builder's impossible progress, the horse. Without Svadilfari's inhuman strength and endurance, there was no way the builder could finish alone in the time remaining. So Loki devised a plan, one so strange it could only have come from him. That night, as the builder guided Svadilfari toward the forest to gather one final load of stone, a beautiful mare suddenly appeared from among the trees, trotting out into the open with clear intention. Svadilfari, a stallion in every sense, immediately took notice and completely abandoned his work, breaking free from his harness entirely to chase after her. The mare, of course, was Loki, transformed completely, using his shape-shifting abilities in a way even the other gods hadn't fully anticipated when they demanded he fix this. The builder tried desperately to call his horse back, chasing after him through the darkening forest. But Svadilfari, thoroughly distracted, ignored every command completely, running deeper into the trees after the mare, who kept just barely out of reach, leading him further and further from the worksite. The chase continued through the entire night. The builder ran after his horse for hours, calling out, growing more frantic and exhausted with every passing moment, watching his one chance at completing the wall on schedule slip further away with each minute Svadilfari remained missing. Without the stallion's strength to haul stone, there was no realistic way to finish the remaining section of wall before the deadline arrived. By the time morning light broke over the horizon, the builder returned to the worksite alone, without his horse, and without any hope of completing the work in time. When the deadline finally arrived and the wall remained visibly, undeniably incomplete, the terms of the contract were clear. The builder had failed to deliver on the promise he'd made, through no fault of the gods, at least as far as the letter of the agreement was concerned. The payment of Freya, the sun, and the moon was no longer owed. The builder, understanding what had happened, and likely suspecting some kind of interference given how uncharacteristically his loyal horse had behaved, reacted with pure rage. And it was at this point in the myth that his true nature was revealed. In his fury, the builder's disguise fell away entirely, revealing that he wasn't a builder at all, but a giant, one who had used illusion or careful concealment to appear as an ordinary craftsman throughout the entire negotiation and construction process. Enraged at being cheated out of payment he felt he had rightfully earned, the giant began threatening violence against Asgard itself, making clear he intended to take by force what he couldn't collect through the broken agreement. The gods, having narrowly avoided handing over Freya, the sun, and the moon, now faced an entirely different threat, and furious giants standing at their gates, revealed and dangerous. Word of the situation reached Thor, who had been away during the entire ordeal, dealing with matters in the Eastern realms. Returning to find a giant threatening Asgard, having nearly tricked the gods out of one of their own along with the sun and moon, Thor didn't hesitate for even a moment. He confronted the giant directly, and rather than engaging in any further negotiation or discussion about broken contracts and technicalities, he settled the matter the way Thor typically settled matters requiring urgency, with his hammer. The giant, whatever power or size he possessed, was no match for Thor's fury, and the confrontation ended swiftly and decisively. The threat to Asgard was over. As for the wall itself, it remained standing, mostly complete except for that one final gap near the gate that had never been finished. In some versions of this myth, the gods completed that remaining section themselves afterward, using more conventional labor. In others, the incomplete gap simply became one of the ways Asgard remained slightly less than perfectly sealed off from the rest of the 9 realms, a small crack in an otherwise impressive fortification, permanently marking the strange origins of the entire structure. Either way, Asgard finally had the protection it desperately needed, built almost entirely through the labor of a single deceived giant and his horse, at the cost of nothing but Loki's dignity. But the story doesn't quite end there, because we still need to circle back to what actually happened to Loki during that long night in the forest. Loki, still in the form of a mare, had successfully lured Svadilfari away and kept him thoroughly distracted throughout the entire night, exactly as intended. What wasn't originally part of the plan was what happened between them during that time. Some months later, Loki gave birth to a foal, the direct result of that night with Svadilfari, and this was no ordinary horse. The foal had 8 legs instead of the usual 4, and grew into an animal unlike anything else in the 9 realms, faster and stronger than any other horse that had ever existed. This 8-legged foal was named Sleipnir, and Loki, despite the deeply strange circumstances of his birth, eventually gave him to Odin as a gift. Sleipnir became Odin's personal steed from that point forward, carrying him across all 9 realms with a speed no other creature could match, able to travel between the world of the living and the realm of the dead with equal ease. In later stories throughout Norse mythology, Sleipnir appears again and again, always as Odin's mount, always described as the fastest and most remarkable horse in existence, directly connecting one of Loki's strangest, most chaotic moments to one of Odin's most iconic possessions. There's something genuinely fascinating about how this entire story unfolds. It begins with the gods trying to be clever, adding an impossible condition to a deal they assumed would simply fail on its own, only to watch their plan nearly backfire completely when the giant proves more capable than expected. It requires Loki, the source of the original scheme, to fix his own mistake through an even stranger solution, one that ends up altering his own body and identity in a way none of the other gods likely anticipated when they threatened him. And it ends with an act of decisive violence from Thor, cleaning up a diplomatic disaster that clever scheming alone couldn't fully resolve. It's a story that captures nearly everything Norse mythology tends to explore: the danger of clever deals with hidden costs, the unpredictable consequences of trickery, and the reminder that even gods aren't above being outmaneuvered by their own cleverness. It's also worth pointing out how strange Loki's position is throughout this entire myth. He causes the crisis by proposing the original trick. He very nearly gets himself killed by the other gods when that trick backfires. And he ultimately resolves the entire situation, but only through a solution so bizarre and personally transformative that it results in him giving birth to one of mythology's most famous creatures. No other god in Norse mythology experiences quite this combination of causing disaster, facing real consequences, and resolving it through pure shape-shifting chaos. It's simultaneously one of his cleverest moments and one of his most dignified, which honestly sums up Loki's entire role across Norse mythology as a whole. Sleipnir goes on to become one of the most consistently referenced figures throughout later Norse myths, always tied directly to Odin. He's described as being able to gallop through the air and across water with equal ease, making him uniquely suited to Odin's role as a god who moves between worlds, between the realm of gods, the realm of humans, and the realm of the dead, all without difficulty. In a mythology built around figures constantly traveling between realms of messengers, ravens, wolves, and gods alike, Sleipnir stands out as perhaps the single most capable traveler of them all, born from one of the strangest nights in the entire mythology. Zoom out, and this myth actually explains the separate, permanent features of the world the gods inhabit: Asgard's walls, protecting the realm of the gods from that point forward, and Sleipnir, Odin's legendary mount, carrying him across every realm for the rest of Norse mythology. Both exist because of the same chaotic chain of events, starting with a desperate bargain, nearly ending in catastrophic failure, and resolving through one of the strangest tricks any god in this mythology ever pulled. It's easy to focus on just the strange, memorable image of Loki as a mare, but the actual consequences of this myth ripple outward into some of the most important elements of the entire Norse cosmology. So the next time you see Asgard's walls mentioned in any Norse myth, or see Odin riding into battle on Sleipnir, remember where both of them actually came from: a deal that almost went catastrophically wrong, a giant who was far more capable than anyone expected, and a trick so strange that Loki himself ended up giving birth to fix it. It's one of the most bizarre stories in all of Norse mythology, and also one of the most consequential, connecting directly to two things that show up again and again throughout everything that follows. If you want the next video to dive into Sleipnir's role during Ragnarok, or Loki's other shape-shifting stories, let me know in the comments.